House Bill 4014 by Conley of the House and Bergstrom of the Senate, an act relating to public libraries.
Representative Conley, you're recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's an amendment on the bill.
Clerk will read it.
Madam Speaker, I move to amend House Bill 4014, page 2, section 1, line 5. Amendment submitted by Conley.
Representative Conley, would you like to explain your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment is language that was promised in committee, and it just clarifies a parent and guardian and designates that it's a minor child.
Representative Conley requests unanimous consent that the amendment be adopted. Without objection, that will be the order. Representative Conley, we're back on the bill as amended. You're recognized to explain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill just serves to ensure that parents and guardians have access to their their child's library records. I move for passage and open for questions.
Representative Bennett, you have a question on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, during a committee, I asked you a series of questions that essentially had to do with, situations where students may be researching a situation that's happening to them at home and trying to figure out how to navigate perhaps an instance of seeking to emancipate themselves or seeking to find recourse for domestic abuse or something like that. Did you get any chance to think more about that and how this could negatively affect that?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure that that information is going to be available in a school library.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I understand correctly, this bill applies to any public school, any public library, libraries supported by any public funds. So in my view, that would include public libraries where a lot of people can find resources like this, right? And then also, I don't know if this is the case or not, but at schools, oftentimes I know in order to access the internet on the computers there, you have to put in some type of information that would theoretically save all of those searches and information. Is that the kind of information that parents would also be able to get?
Thank you for that question. So let me make sure I understand your question. You're asking if parents would have access to searches that a student has made on a computer? Yeah, I don't believe so.
For one more follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What the bill does, and correct me if I'm wrong, is allows any parent to request any information that the library has about their child. Theoretically, that would include not just the books that they've checked out, but movies they might have checked out, audiobooks, books they requested, and also, perhaps searches that they've made on computers on campus or at that library. So, that's more of a clarification to your question, but my reading of this means all of those things would be available. And so in that context, understanding that there are minor individuals who may be in serious situations at home and are counting on their ability to be safe and have a confidential place to look up information, this would kind of put that in danger in my view. And I'm wondering if you can see where my concerns are coming from.
Thank you for that question and the concern. I actually do appreciate the fact that you're concerned about kids' safety, but just being an educator for the last 30 years, I believe that educators and other people in the school building know their students well enough that if there's something going on, then that teacher's going to probably know about that and be able to advocate for that child. And so I think that they've probably got someone that they've maybe already talked to, in most cases, maybe another family member or something. And if the student is looking for that information and the parent goes looking to see what the student is looking for, then maybe the parent doesn't realize there's an issue, and that would open up a dialogue between the parent and the child.
Representative Goodwin, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Reading the bill, and it's pretty brief. What is your greatest concern in terms of the parent or the guardian being able to track what that student has, I guess, checked out to the other representative's point? What is your biggest concern?
Thank you so much for that question. So it's not that I want parents to be able to track, but in the Parents' Rights Act of 2014, this body decided that it is a parent's right in order to direct a child's education. There have been parents in the state of Oklahoma denied access to their children's library records, and I just wanted to ensure that in the library statute that already exists there, that it's very clear that parents have rights to their children's records. They already have access to that, but because of a national association dictating to our librarians in some cases, that access has been denied. And so this just codifies that a parent has a right to their students and their child's educational information.
For follow-up.
And I'm just getting clarity. You said they already have access. Parents already have access to this information. So I'm going back just to, it's really still the first question. If they already have access and it's already permitted, help me understand, what does this do?
Thank you so much for that question. So what the language does is it clarifies exactly what the parent has a right to in regards to information that the library has collected. So the national organization that I stated before is imparting information to our librarians and telling them that parents do not have access to that information and shouldn't be given access to that information. As Oklahomans and the legislative body, we told parents in 2014 that they have access to their children's information. And so this just clarifies one piece, like in the Parents' Bill of Rights, how we have clarified that they have access to their medical information and their education information, that we are just clarifying that libraries are included in that educational information.
For one more follow-up, you waive? You're recognized for one more follow-up.
And so you've established that it's already possible for parents or guardians to have this information. We already have a law, statute that establishes that from 2014. Should a child be in the library and without checking out a book, right, is just in the library reading, right? How do you, it's not documented. Right. There just seems to be, you would agree the child can be in the library and read what's on the shelf, and it's not necessarily documented. They're not going to check the book out. They just sat there for a while and read. That's okay.
Absolutely. The law says collected information. So if they're in the library and they're reading a book that they've pulled off the shelf, that is not collected information.
Representative Rosecrans, you are recognized for a question on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I meant to find you. I had just a few questions on this. So I know there's no fiscal impact. I saw that. But I have been reached out to by our local library system. They said that this would cost money to implement some changes. Were you aware of that?
No, no one has told me that. And as a matter of fact, the House did a fiscal impact report and said that there would be no fiscal impact. If there is, then I certainly would be interested in knowing what that fiscal impact would be, because it is stating collected information. It's not telling them what to collect and to make any changes to what they're currently collecting. So I don't really honestly see where there's a fiscal impact.
For a follow-up.
And right, when it comes to state funds, yeah, there is no fiscal impact. Like I said, it was a system, our system right there, out in Pioneer Library System, that said that if they were going to change things to track or whatever this does, that it would cost money. Would you be willing to, work to find out if that's true?
Thank you for the question. So again, I'm going to go back to the law doesn't tell them that they have to collect anything. It just says that the parent has access to collected information. So there should be nothing that they have to do in order to make changes to abide by this law.
Representative Provenzano, you're recognized for a question on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm not interested as much on the school side. I would like to talk about the city-county library systems. Can you talk to me about what the application process looks like for a child to get their library card?
Well, thank you for that question. The last time I applied for a children's library card, my children are now 29 and 24. So it's been several years. What that looks like now, I don't know. But it had my name on it. I had to approve that they get the library card, and so I would assume that their name, their address, or my name, my address, their name, in order to get a card.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for that, Representative. So with these changes, I am curious, there will need to be a proof of parentage. So are parents now going to have to start submitting their birth certificates as proof that I'm the parent with this bill?
Thank you very much. It does not designate that in there, and if they don't have to give a birth certificate in order to prove that they're a parent in order to get them a card, then I wouldn't think that, I don't see that happening. We're not changing any of that. It's still the same system.
For one more follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for that. If a parent is listed on the application, but they're no longer allowed to interact with that child for their safety and security, would they still be allowed to access library records?
Thank you for that. In the school system, you and I both know how conscientious educators are and how well-informed principals and the secretaries make teachers and librarians and that sort of thing. I don't see any reason why it is going to be any different in the public library than it is right now. This doesn't make any changes. So if that happens in the public library now, it's going to happen after this as well.
I'll ask you to get back in the queue, please. Thank you. Representative Russ, you're recognized for a question on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative, I've got a question on the libraries that aren't part of the, I would call it the state systems. There's some that are county municipal libraries. Would they be exempt out of this, or are they going to be included in these requirements, or would they be able to be exempt from that? Do you know?
That is a really good question. Let me look again. It says supported by public funds. So I would say that city and county are considered public funds. So yes, they would be impacted.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Madam Speaker. So, Representative, I got an email. It looks like we all got an email that said that the Western Plains System and the Oklahoma Association of Libraries are both in favor of that. Did you mention that and I missed it, or are you aware of that?
Actually, no. Thank you for that. I did not mention that, but thank you for letting me know. I did not see that email.
Leader Virgin, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
You got it?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, I just pulled up my library card at the Pioneer Library System. You just put your card number in and your PIN, and you can see the books that you have checked out. Why do we have to put something in statute when this information is pretty easily accessible if you just access the library card account?
Thank you so much for asking that and for doing that search. Had parents that have been denied access to it, and perhaps they are not on the same system or didn't know that they could access it that way. And I believe that the denial was actually through a public school and not through a public library. And so that, of course, is going to, be different that if they know they can access it through the public side, but not through the actual school side.
For follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It seems that there is a concern about the consumption of certain library materials by young people. And I'm wondering then, does your bill actually address that issue? Because this only deals with materials that are checked out. Mm-hmm. A child can go in the library and peruse all kinds of materials if they want. So how does this actually solve the problem that it seems you and others are concerned about?
Thank you for that. Well, this actually is completely aside from any other legislation that might be being run or concerns that are out there about the materials that they have access to. This is strictly a parent's rights issue, and that's the way it was presented to me, and so that's the reason why it is only about the information that's collected through the library.
For one more follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Are there instances that you know of that this has happened in a public library system? You've talked about school libraries. That seems to be where this might have happened the most. Is it happening also in public library systems?
Thank you for that question. I have not had any notifications that has happened in a public.
Representative Randleman, you have a question on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For our children, whether they're in school or not, you take little kids, they're like a sponge. They learn everything that's in front of them, what they see. In fact, would it be fair to say that they learn by what they see, what they read, what they come in contact with, what play or program is in front of them? Would you believe that they would just soak that up?
Thank you for that, and I absolutely would agree with that.
For a follow-up.
So would you also believe that since that is such an important factor in what really develops the brain, are you aware that the research tells us that 75% of that child's personality is developed by age 9?
Thank you. I absolutely would believe that.
For one more follow-up, please.
So if that's the situation, I think as a parent, and hopefully you would be too, I'd be really concerned about what they come in contact with, whether it's in a library, whether it's in a classroom, and wherever. Is that true?
Thank you so much for that. I am actually just so encouraged that parents are concerned about what their children are consuming, and I would hope that this would encourage parents to pay more attention in the future.
Representative Bell, you're recognized for a question on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, I'm just curious because I heard you mention before that this isn't an issue in our public libraries or publicly funded libraries, except for perhaps in a school or in a particular school district. I'm wondering if you can tell the body what school district that is.
Thank you for the question. Stillwater.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And how many school districts do we have total in the state?
521, maybe? I don't know. It seems like the number changes.
For one more follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leniency. So we're talking about something that may have happened to one or a small group of parents in terms of the denial that you're talking about in 1 out of 500 plus school districts across the state?
Thank you so much for that. And what I would say about that is that, you know, you may only see one cockroach in your kitchen, but doesn't mean there's only one there.
Representative Chad Caldwell, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, I think this is probably self-explanatory, but I didn't see it defined in there, so I just want to clarify. It says child, so we're thinking everybody under 18 years. Is that correct? So 17 years, 11 months, 29 days. Is that correct?
Thank you so much for that. In the amendment, we actually added the word minor so that I'm guessing under the age of 18. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
For a follow-up, he waves. Representative Waldron, you have a question on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I pre-uncoiled my microphone today. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill forward. I note that the Oklahoma Library Association has expressed opposition to the bill, but my question has to do with the national organization. You know that the American Library Association is not affiliated with the United States government, but is based in Chicago, yes?
Thank you for that. I was not aware, I don't think, that they were based in Chicago. If I knew that, I'd forgotten.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fun fact, incorporated in 1874. Now, the practices of the American Library Association reflect the consensus view of the various state library associations. To come back to the point about the Oklahoma Library Association, what we see here are a set of rules that have been worked out by consensus of the various professional library associations. So why are we meddling with the work of these good professionals?
I am actually so glad you asked that. And the National Association is actually the one that has aligned with the United Nations in saying that children should be considered sovereign at the age of 13. They have, if I might read something to you. On December 18th, 2013, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution reaffirming that the right to personal privacy applies to the use of communications technology, digital records, and requiring the governments of member nations to respect and protect the privacy rights of individuals. We affirm our belief that these are inalienable rights of every person, regardless of origin, age, background, or views. We embody our professional commitment to these principles in the Library Bill of Rights and Code of Ethics as adopted by the American Library Association. So it's actually the American Library Association that is telling our librarians that our children, that we do not have rights to their information, to their school information. When we passed it in 2014, or this body passed it in 2014, that parents have the right to their educational records, which includes their library records.
Representative Waldron, your final follow-up. And members, I am closing the queue at this time. Representative Waldron, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Coming back to the original point about the opposition of the local Oklahoma Library Association, don't you think that invoking the United Nations takes us pretty far from the child in the library and the librarian behind the desk?
Thank you for that question. And I would say that when the American Library Association is the one dictating the information to our local libraries, and they are taking their direction from the United Nations, then yeah, we need to bring it to the state, and the state needs to enact our sovereignty away from the American Library Association of the United Nations. This is an Oklahoma issue, not a UN and not an ALA.
Representative Blanchette, you have a question on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, I'm a mom, care about kids, have a lovely son, and did check up on his reading materials quite regularly, I will just say. However, I am also concerned about what this is going to do in terms of taking a small, isolated problem in somewhere in western Oklahoma or wherever and making it a statewide new piece of legislation. And so my question is, what documentation would be necessary for each local librarian in our public library system to determine that a person is in fact the parent of record for a specific child in their community. So what procedure will they have to go through or implement locally, and how will they be able to match a parent with the child that might have checked a book out of the thousands of children that check books out from a technology perspective?
Thank you for that question. I would hope that they're already doing their due diligence and checking to make sure that when a parent brings a child into the library, signs them up for a card, or allows them to check out a book that is above and beyond maybe what they should be, movies, that sort of thing, they should be doing their due diligence now. This bill should not be requiring them to check credentials in order to advocate for their children.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Okay, I'm not really sure that there was an answer in that. I'm just asking, I'm a parent. I want to go through, my child's reading records. So, but I'm also thinking about the librarian and the library system and what it might require to implement such a piece of legislation. What documentation are they going to require to pair that child with that? Because when you sign up for a library card, I don't believe that you actually have parental records with the library card. Is that correct?
Thank you. I would hope that anytime they are accessing information, bringing them in, signing up for the card to start with, that they are providing a driver's license or something. I mean, are libraries doing that now? Are they checking to see that this parent is saying that they are the parent of the child? I mean, I don't see where the problem is, because they should be doing this already. They should be checking for verification already.
Your final follow-up, please.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, you think and know are two different things, but my question is, what are the consequences to the library system or the librarian individually if they grant permission to the wrong person or to someone who doesn't have parental rights for that particular child? What are the consequences for that library system or librarian?
So whatever the consequences are now would be what the consequences are then. This piece of legislation is not, this is not a crimes and punishment bill. This is just stating that parents have the right to access their children's information in the library.
Representative Anthony Moore, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would it surprise you to know that this morning I got an email from a constituent who happens to be a librarian that says this is already a concept in our local policy, as parents are financially responsible for items borrowed on a dependent's account. I wouldn't ask a parent to pay for something but not tell them what the item is. It is also a strong position of public libraries throughout Oklahoma that parents control access to what their children read. This parental control is only possible when they can view their child's library records. Would that surprise you that I heard that this morning?
Thank you so much for that. I absolutely love that you received that from a very conscientious librarian.
For a follow-up.
Thank you. As a parent of 3 minor children, would it surprise you that I don't really care what anyone in Chicago thinks that I should do for them?
Thank you. I would 100% agree with that. This is Oklahoma.
Representative Fugate, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I actually think I have maybe 3 independent questions.
You're recognized for a question and 2 follow-ups, please.
Thank you. Madam Representative, in Oklahoma, minors can get married at the age of 16, and they can actually be younger than 16 with parental consent and still get married. Under your bill, is there anything that prevents their parents, or the parents of married children, from accessing their children's records when those children are still under the age of 18 and already married?
Thank you so much for that. You know, in committee, I was asked to add the word minor children because an adult was afraid that their adult parent would go into the library and look for their information. So, you know, at 16, you're still a minor. It doesn't matter whether you're married or not, you're still a minor.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think what I heard was that, yes, it's okay to access the records of your married children as long as they're under the age of 18. The second question I have then, if I may, relates to the assertion about non-custodial parents. And the concern I have is that a non-custodial parent could gain access to their children's records. Can you point to anything in this language that prevents somebody who is a non-custodial parent from accessing records that they should not be accessing? Because I see here on page 2, it is parent or legal guardian. And I see nothing in here that indicates non-custodial, so perhaps I'm missing something?
Thank you. That is a really good point. So I would think that the way it stands is that if you are the parent who applied for and got the card and the one that is responsible for the payments for lost books or fees, then your name is the one on the library card and the record of the child. So that's going to be the person that's going to have access to it. I would think that if your name is not on the list at the library, then you're not going to have access to the information.
For a follow-up, your final follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And that might be a good provision, but that's not what the language in this bill says at all. It says parent or guardian. It doesn't say parent that signed up for somebody's library card. It doesn't say the parent that's responsible for the payment of it. It says the parent. So the final question, if I may then, is dealing with any library that is supported in whole or in part by public funds. And the question I have is, if this body were to pass private school vouchers, those private schools are then funded by public dollars, would their libraries be subject to these same rules?
Well, I would say, thank you for that. In order to clarify, I would say that private schools are still private schools, even if they receive public dollars. They don't currently receive public dollars, and so, you know, it's kind of a moot point until we cross that bridge.
Representative Humphrey, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to follow up after this question. Representative, thank you for the courage to carry this bill. I look at everything through a law enforcement person's eyes and being law enforcement. And so as a law enforcement officer, we have a charge called lewd, indecent proposals to a minor. And so my question is, do you think that a parent should have the right to know if their child is being exposed to things that are lewd and indecent?
Thank you for that. I absolutely do, yes.
You're recognized.
I've been reviewing and I've been working on trying to find out, and what I've found is not one school district. There are more than one school districts that have graphic pictures. We're talking about books that have graphic pictures of rape and are describing rape from the eyes of the rapists. We have books that are showing how to perform different sex acts, including oral sex. Books that are talking about where people were kidnapped, human trafficked, raped.
Representative, do you have a follow-up? I hate to interrupt there, but can we get to our follow-up question?
I was on the road, Mr. Speaker,
I know
but
you were.
I'll wrap
I appreciate
it up.
it.
So do you think that those are indecent acts, lewd proposals? And really, as a law enforcement officer, I think we have a duty to actually arrest those people, not just inform the parents. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And this, you know, that's what, you know, part of this, you could apply it to that if parents are concerned about what children are having access to, this is definitely going to give them a picture of that.
Representative Humphrey, I can sense by the smile on your face that maybe you have a follow-up. Can I ask you to get back in the queue and we'll... Okay. Queue is closed. I'm sorry. I take that back. I retract my offer. Representative Provenzano, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, in our school districts, the burden of proof is on the parent for, we all want our kids to be safe. Absolutely. I want to know what my kids are reading. Absolutely. But in a school district, you have to provide a birth certificate. You have to be able to prove that you're the parent. When you go to, and I'm switching to public, you have to fill in your name, maybe show your ID. It doesn't necessarily prove that you're mom or dad, but maybe it was a non-custodial parent now that applied for a library card 10 years ago. And that's sad, but that's the reality. And my concern is we are potentially creating an unsafe situation for kids now that didn't exist 10 years ago or 5 years ago or last year, whenever. In committee I asked, would perhaps a parent, non-custodial either, have access to not just titles, but the dates kids go to the library, the timestamps they go to the library, without providing a birth certificate, without providing legal documentation? How do we keep that kid who perhaps just got the snot beat out of her by a parent a year ago and is now a non-custodial parent, how do we keep them from having access to those records? Because I can't live with that. There's no guardrails in this bill to protect from that. And for us to just keep saying, oh, it's okay, the library should do this. Oh, by the way, there's no fiscal impact, does not ring true for me. Can you help me understand that?
Thank you so much for that. So I can hear your heart, and I can hear how passionate you are about this. And so perhaps an interim study determining what policies and procedures there are in the public libraries to safeguard these things for children would be an appropriate thing for us to do.
You're recognized for a follow-up.
You asking me to wait a year to make kids safe?
Thank you so much for that. This has not been a concern of anybody else's until I bring this to the floor to talk about parents' rights and having access to their library records. So I would think that if you've waited this long in order to protect kids through this, then that's, another year. Maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's what we do.
Representative Bell, you are recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, would you be surprised at the number of text messages that I've received since from librarians and other educators since hearing your comment about cockroaches earlier on the floor?
Thank you. I don't really know how that applies to this rule. My point is, no, I'm good. I don't know how that has anything to do with this.
For follow-up.
Thank you. To clarify your question, I'll just say that I think it's relevant because other people, and my question to you in response would be, would you feel, as I do, given your expertise in education, would you appreciate the comparison that you made to cockroaches if you were in the position of these librarians who, in one instance, we say that they're very conscientious, but then we also say, well, where there are one cockroaches who are not following the rules that are already in place, then there are many. Do you see how that would be upsetting if I were you?
Thank you so much. I was not calling any librarian a cockroach. I was just saying that where there's one, there's many. And that is simply stating that if there is one place that is telling a parent that they cannot have access to their children's records, then there's probably more. Certainly did not mean to offend anyone.
Representative Goodwin, you are recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hear your heart on this bill. We talked about the American Library Association, and then we're understanding that the Oklahoma Library Association is opposed to this bill. Would you agree that the Oklahoma Library Association, neither the American Library Association, none of those associations have any kind of legal standing or anything that's legally binding as relates to Title 25, and it talks about the parental rights that we already have. And those parental rights, it says all parental rights are reserved to a parent of a minor child without obstruction or interference from the state, any political subdivision of the state, any other governmental entity, or any other institution, including but not limited to the following rights: the right to direct the education of the minor child. 2, all rights of parents identified in Title 70 of the Oklahoma statutes, including the right to access and review all school records relating to the minor child. And then 3, it says the upbringing, the ability to direct the upbringing of the minor child. Would you agree that we already have statutes in place, and neither the Oklahoma Library Association or the American Library Association would supersede our legal statutes? Would you agree?
Thank you so much for that. So what I would say is that the American Library Association has directed our librarians, not all of them follow it, but apparently some of them do, okay? I'm not saying they all do, but some of them are, and so therefore they are denying the rights that are afforded to parents through the Education Rights Act of 2014. So therefore, we obviously need to codify into law that parents have access to those library records. And I would say that if the Oklahoma Library Association has a problem with this, then they have a problem with giving parents their rights that they are afforded not by a piece of legislation, but by God Almighty.
You're recognized for a follow-up.
May God help us. The question was, do you agree that the statute that we already have that I read, that these statutes supersede any policy by the Oklahoma Library Association or the American Library Association? And I don't think, may God help us as we go through all of this. Mm-hmm. Would you agree that our statutes supersede policy by an organization or an association?
Thank you. And yes, I agree that Oklahoma law supersedes federal law, but apparently there are others who are not acknowledging that, and so therefore we obviously must make it clear to those who are not following the Oklahoma statute that and the provision given to parents through the Parents' Rights Act. We're specifying what they have access to.
I'll give you one quick follow-up. We're going to move to debate here really quick, so let's be brief.
Thank you. From my voice to God's ear, I never said that you mentioned federal statutes. I never mentioned federal statutes. So from my voice to God's ear, if only God is listening, I just want to be clear as we're trying to get to the bottom of this. If the question was, our law supersedes policy, would you agree? That was the question.
I do agree that our law supersedes policy, but again, some of our librarians are not acknowledging that our statute even exists, and so therefore, if we must, let's make sure that everyone understands what parents have right to.
Just a reminder, members, we've closed the queue for questions, so we're going to move to debate. Representative Conley now moves that House Bill 4014 be advanced from general order. Without objection, that'll be the order. Third reading of the bill.
House Bill 4014 by Conley of the House and Bergstrom of the Senate, an act relating to public libraries.
Representative Conley now moves final passage of the bill. Will there be debate? There will be debate. Clerk will open the queue for debate. Those debating in favor of the measure, please press your green button. Those debating against, press your red button. Close the queue. Members debating in favor of the measure are Representative Randleman, Representative Eccles, and Representative Conley. Members debating against the measure are Representative Bell and Representative Provenzano. House will stand at ease while we prepare for debate. Representative Randleman, you're recognized to debate for the measure. You're recognized for 10 minutes. Up to 10 minutes. You don't have to use it all.
I won't. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we sit here, and I understand why we are debating this bill and what it's for, because there's nothing more important than our children. You know, when they're growing up, even before they're born, they're actually putting information in the brain, so it's stored. And then after you were born, there's time periods that's very significant. Your earliest recollection should be at 3 years old. Most recollections are usually a negative connotation. But if you can't remember that at 3 years old, that cues us to look at things that may have happened before that to address that child and cause problems for that child. So as you get older, the more you get involved, the more that you see, the more that you hear, etc., is going to form that brain and how that it reacts. For example, why would we have a 4-year-old with a trauma and we have another 4-year-old with a trauma, and one gets depression, one gets anxiety, the other side comes over here, he's more of a behavioral disorder, more of a mood disorder? It's due to that perception that's in that child. So just because that trauma's there, we have to know how that child perceives that trauma, because that's what's going to develop that personality in that direction. So what the kids see in a library is so important. I would not want my child or grandchild exposed to explicit information that they should not have. Because when you talk about a 3 or 4-year-old child, just seeing that information is traumatic. So that will affect that child to that degree. So we always want to be concerned what the child sees on TV, what the child is involved with, how much arguing is with that child, how much fighting there is with that child. There's a term that we use in psychology, it's called identifying with the aggressor. So if I see aggression, guess how I'm going to solve problems? I'm going to solve problems with aggression. And this child will probably get more severe and more severe unless someone deals with that knows how to. So what he is involved with, and when we look at this aspect of being in the library, is so important. And I want us, and I really think the Representative Conley about running this bill. This needs to be in our schools. If not, you're going to have more problems with our children that we have now. Think about it. Why do we have so many problems with children? Why do we have so many problems with adolescents? Do you think that just happened in one day? Or do you think it happened in a number of series all through that child was growing up and he stored more information, and more information? And you know, in therapy, it is a lot easier for me to deal with a 3-year-old than someone who is 15 and 16. Why? Because so many of those chemical pathways are already made. So when she's running this bill, I'm 100% behind her. It is so important for our children. I'll also say one more thing, because this is what came out earlier. Do you realize that there is a statute that the non-custodial parent has just as much right to the information as the legal custodial parent? If you don't believe that, sit in a chair with the judge and let him correct you while you're on that stand. So do know that the custodial parent has a big effect on that child. But still yet, if we let that child go to the non-custodial parent, and you don't have the right to take them away unless there's something really severe, but if you do, whatever's going on in that household is going to affect that child. Now, in therapy, rather than getting better every week, because if I'm doing therapy, you should be getting better and a little bit better and a little bit better. But if you've got one parent doing one thing and another parent doing something else, here's the pattern that you're going to see. You're going to see that child get better, and then you're going to see that child regress. You're going to see him get better, and he's going to regress. Causes lots of confusion. Now you have a reduction of serotonin in the amygdala piece of the brain, so now we're going to be dealing with some depression. We're going to be dealing with some anxiety that's on top of what he's learned from what he sees. So everything that is involved with that child is so important. I strongly support the aspect of every parent knowing what's in that library, what that child has access to in that library, even what access that child has on a TV in there. Or if he's in a classroom that comes out and they curse all the time, then he's going to have cursing. I have this saying to a lot of people that come into my office, and I'll actually say, have you been to London? Many times people will tell me no. Then what I'll say, your child has been to London, or he wouldn't know how to curse. He's heard that from somebody. So that's a part of his personality. So now you don't get to just decide what's going on. You really have to confront what is put in that brain and change it. So think about changing. If I work with a child and I get him to progress, and then he's following me, he trusts me, I build up the transference. But what if I hit that child? He pulls back, he won't have anything to do with me for months. Same thing, just like if you talked about a dog. If you have a dog, close dog that you're close to, you kick him, see how long that he stays away from you. See how he runs around you and not to you anymore. That's what we're talking about with these children. So we have to be concerned about what's that child has been exposed to with a father. We have to be know what he's been exposed to the mother's side, and not just family members, public school, what you let him be involved with, because that's developing that personality. So it just kind of shows us, and the research supports this, that we want to know everything that that child is exposed to. Both parents have the right of it, and I want to tell you this involves in the school too. You know, your parents have the most time with the child, your mother and father. The next aspect that the child has the most time is the public school. So if we don't do something in the public school, we're really setting this child up for failure or to develop a personality that he's going to have more problems down later. Why do you think that we have all the teenagers out here that we have trouble with? Because they've been exposed to all of these negative things that we're trying hard not to do with this bill. And I just want to encourage everybody, if you have a child or if you have a grandchild, know what he is exposed to in every environment. Grandparents, parents, school, etc., is going to form his personality and could develop in some real major issues. I encourage you to vote for this bill. I think it's so important that our representative has put this bill out there, and I hope that everyone will vote for it and support it. I'll revert the rest of my time to Representative Conley.
Thank you for your debate. Representative Conley already has the maximum amount of time allowed. Representative Bell, you are recognized for 10 minutes to debate against the measure.
But not all 10 minutes, right, Mr. Speaker?
You don't have to use all 10.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, first of all. Second of all, I'm not standing to debate today necessarily to change anybody's mind, because I think this is one of those issues where people's minds are mostly made up. But I did want to offer a few observations just based on the discussion that we've had on the floor today. Number one is, I can't help but note that based on previous things that we voted on, Mr. Speaker, I'm thinking back to last week when we voted on an election bill that was more akin to situations that were happening in Wisconsin than they were here, that today we're saying now and being very adamant, or I heard other members be very adamant, that this is not Chicago, this is Oklahoma. Just noted a little bit of hypocrisy there. I mean, I think we all know this is Oklahoma, and I'm here to talk about Oklahoma-related problems and do whatever we can together as a body to fix them, Mr. Speaker. But I don't know that I find one school limiting one or maybe more parents' access, if that's true, to be a problem that affects our entire state. And I like bills that actually solve problems, Mr. Speaker, not bills that provide us what I've witnessed as more of a vehicle to talk about a hot button topic, being parental rights. I feel like I have plenty of rights as a parent, and I don't have any hesitation in saying that if I went to my library, my son's library, or one of our public libraries, that they'd be happy to provide this information. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that I mentioned this in our conversation as well with my colleague and my neighbor from Cleveland County. But, you know, one of the other things that we've also talked about in this body so far this session is that the things that we do have consequences even if we didn't intend them. And I actually talked to my 8-year-old about that a lot. He'll say, "I didn't mean to," when he spills spaghetti on the floor or something. And I'll say, "Well, you didn't mean to, but the spaghetti's on the floor now." There are consequences for things that we certainly don't intend, especially when we're a precious, beautiful little 8-year-old. But there are consequences. And when we stand up and say things about people, regardless of whether or not we're passionate, we make comparisons, and we sort of say one thing in one breath and another in another breath, Mr. Speaker. So, for instance, in this case, I heard one of my colleagues say that our educators in Oklahoma are very conscientious, but, you know, if one of them is doing something wrong, you know, they're like cockroaches. There are more of them doing something wrong. I find that very insulting, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I don't know how we can say, we trust you because we believe that you care and you're conscientious, but we know if one of you got away with something, then more of you are probably going to try to get away with it too. That seems to be a very pessimistic view to me. And my issue with parents' rights bills, Mr. Speaker, is that they're doing more harm than good. In my estimation, a bill like this really has a potential to unintentionally erode the public's trust in our educational system and in the people who work tirelessly every day to educate our children. You know, I think the last point that I'll make, Mr. Speaker, just as an aside, though it's relevant, is that libraries are vast resources for our communities. I don't think anybody, including the bill's author, is arguing that. But not every book is for everybody. So I think when we, as members, start to go down this road, which I don't even really think this bill is intended to do, but the representative from House District 15 made this point in his debate, that, you know, we should be really worried about the things that children are exposed to. Well, I have to tell you, I'll confess, I was not the best student in school. Shocker. And I did not read or come into contact with every single publication in my school's library. In fact, I don't know that I checked one library book out in high school. But here I am, Mr. Speaker, despite the odds. So my point is that I was actually exposed to far less than my library might have allowed, because I had people around me who were making sure that I wasn't exposed to things that I didn't need to be. I tend to be in favor of thinking of our educators as conscientious and caring and thoughtful in the decisions that they make, including the library books that are included in our libraries, and I trust them to make those decisions, and I'm not here as a member to dictate to them how to do their job. I wouldn't dictate to you how to do your job outside of this body. I wouldn't dictate to anybody else whose job I haven't had how to do it, because I trust that they have better knowledge and better sense than I do to be able to make those decisions. I don't want to vote for bills like this, Mr. Speaker, because I don't want that trust eroded any further in our public schools. That's my concern, more than anything, about the unintended consequences of a bill like this. And I think that's all I'm going to say. 3:25 left. It's not bad. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for your debate. Representative Eccles, you are recognized for 10 minutes to debate in favor of the measure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and for those listening, we have spent over an hour on a bill debating this one question. Do you, the parent, have the right to know which library books your child is checking out? That is the one single solitary question. On this floor, we've heard phrases like abuser and non-custodial parent put together in the same sentence. The disdain for non-custodial parents is palpable in statements like that. Mr. Speaker, this bill is not complicated. This bill is about whether or whose job is it to protect your children. And Mr. Speaker, one of the great things about this bill is we are about to have a division at a fundamental belief structure at whose job is it to protect your children. The amount of time this bill is taking is shocking to me. My constituents in House District 90, to a person, the vast majority are going to believe it is the parent's job to protect their children. We've heard statements on the floor today that somehow imply the Oklahoma Library Association is against this bill. That is not true. I've texted them while I've been on this floor. The Oklahoma Library Association is not against this bill. As a matter of fact, they're neutral on this bill. That doesn't shock me at all. Let me be clear. Non-custodial parents, to me, I don't view you as an abuser. Non-custodial parents, to me, I view you as parent. Do we need to protect you from abusers? Absolutely. Do I strongly, with every fiber of my being, want to fight against that we're going to assume all parents are abusers? Therefore, they're not entitled to the library books that their kids check out? This is one of the easiest bills we have ever had on the floor. But the fundamental question is this, and no one should be able to hide behind the Library Association. They've been crystal clear they're neutral on this bill. There is one question and one question only. Whose job is it to protect your children? You know, it's funny, in my house, I'll pick up my son's cell phone. Dad, what are you doing looking at my cell phone? I've got a phrase I use all the time. I'm not looking at your cell phone, I'm looking at my cell phone. That's my cell phone. I pay for that cell phone. You want to know why? Because I'm concerned about what my kids are looking at. Because I don't need the government to raise my kids. Of course I trust librarians. Give me a break. Of course I trust them. I'm not saying they can't check the books out. This is a two-sentence bill. Are parents entitled to know what their children check out? You are about to see the greatest culling as to the view of parents on the vote of this bill. And I am proud to stand and say, parents, you are entitled. And I'm not going to play any manipulative games and somehow say that means I'm against librarians. That's simply not true. What I am going to say is, parents, you are entitled to look at the materials your children check out. This is common sense. This isn't partisan. I'm hoping we're just tired and late and making weird decisions. But members, I'm going to send a clear message to my district. Parents, I trust you. Non-custodial parents, I don't think you're all abusers. I don't think that. As a matter of fact, I think there's a lot of non-custodial mom and dads that love their kids. As a matter of fact, I think the vast majority of the non-custodial parents love their kids, and they're also entitled, by the way, to be in their children's lives. And it's bad for those kids when they don't have parents, good parents, that are involved in their children's lives. Man, I wish we were debating on this floor why every parent doesn't go look into what their children are viewing, instead of debating whether or not every parent has a right to look at what their children are doing. Members, I urge you to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Member does yield the remainder of his time. Representative Provenzano, you're recognized for 10 minutes to debate against the measure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, there's not a parent or a person or a brother or a sister or a family member that doesn't want to know what their kids are reading, and they want to make sure their kids are safe. Do I want to know what my kids were reading when they were growing up? They're moved out now. My house is nice and quiet. You bet I did. And you bet I checked. Now, I will concede to the good representative from Stigler and the good representative from Southwest Oklahoma City. Not all non-custodial parents are bad. 99.99999% of them are. There are custodial parents that sometimes have problems. My father was a non-custodial parent until he passed away this last year. He was an amazing dad, is an amazing dad. But let me dive into that for a second. And perhaps I misspoke there, because just this last summer, I dealt with a parent and a family, much very different situation, where the dad was abusing the young daughter and his family. Those are the parents that I'm speaking of. Those parents that are abusing their children should not have access to information like this. They should not have access to when a child is going to the library so they can show up and be there if there is a restraining order against those parents. I struggle with this because I know the good representative's heart, Mr. Speaker. But there are some instances that we cannot allow this to happen in, and they're not built into this bill. Is training and compensation for how to deal with a situation like that provided for in this bill? What state agency is responsible for promulgating these rules? Is that in the bill? No. There will clearly be a fiscal impact, because in our school districts, you have to prove that you're the parent. When you enroll your child for school, it stays there. We know the second a parent isn't supposed to have access to their child, and we build in all sorts of protections for that kid. That's what I'm asking for here. Protect our children truly, and not just lip service. Do I want to know what book titles my kiddo was checking out? Yes, but I would far prefer that they stay safe while they're doing it. And there's a risk here. Why wouldn't we build the guardrails into this bill? Why wouldn't we start there? How do we keep all kids safe, bar none? Again, do I want to know what my kids are reading? Did you check, Mr. Speaker? I did. You did. This is hard for me because I don't want to be misconstrued, but I held that little girl's hand this last summer and said I was sorry and that I would do everything I could to protect her. Not in my family, but in my district. I have to protect her. I have to help that family stay safe. I would ask that we do not pass this bill in its current version. I think every parent in this room knows what I'm talking about. Hopefully every parent in this room knows my heart. But let's go back and do better. I humbly ask that you vote against. Thank you.
Thank you for your debate. Member does yield the rest of her time. Representative Conley, you are recognized for 10 minutes to debate in favor of the measure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to take all 10 minutes, members. You all know my intention on this bill is to protect parents' rights. It's been given to us by not just the Parents' Rights Act for the state of Oklahoma, but also by our Lord and Savior, simply through birth. What I will say is that I have taken my children to the library when they were little. We used to visit the summer programs through the Pioneer Library System, and the library people they're good people. They're there because they find information and knowledge valuable. Okay, I'm not going to deny that. Same with our librarians that are in our schools. I am going to step out on a limb here and say that there are already policies and procedures in place in those public libraries to protect children, because if they're not, we're in trouble now and have been in trouble for the last however many years in the history of public libraries in the state of Oklahoma. Is it something that probably needs to be looked at? It sounds like it. Am I opposed to adding any kind of safeguards that need to be there? No, I'm not. But I'm also going to say that, again, if there are not currently policies and procedures in place in our public libraries to protect children from predators of any kind, whether it be, a parent who has, been determined to not have legal right to their children, we're in trouble now and have been. So with that, I'm just going to say that the bottom line of this is that in the state of Oklahoma, we should not be listening to an association who is dictating whether or not parents have access to their children's library records. And from the couple of complaints that have come out of a town in our great state, I would say that there's probably more that have not been reported. Parents didn't know what to do about it. And so now they know that if they're told that they cannot have access to their children's library records, that will be against the law now, and that the parent will know what their rights are through the law, guaranteed to them, not just through parentage, but through this body that says parents have access and should have the right to access all information that is in the public library, whether it is the public or the public school. I'm asking members to support me on this, to vote and stand with parents and say, we've got your back. We believe that you are the responsible party for your child, and that it is important that you have access to your children's records, and that you know that we support you. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking for everyone to vote yes on this and stand with parents. Thank you.
Thank you for your debate. Members, you have heard the debate. The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Clerk will activate the machines. Sergeants announce roll call in the halls. Roll call is now in progress. Representative Moore votes aye. Representative Pittman votes nay. Members wishing to vote or change their vote, chair is preparing to close. Declare the vote.
81 aye, 13 nay.
Having received a majority vote of those elected to and constituting the House, I declare the bill to have passed.